In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how my client Tyler scaled his business from $30,000 per month to a consistent and predictable $150,000 monthly in just 6 months. My first conversation with Tyler was about 12 months ago, and he was telling me how he was working 70 to 80 hours a week and he was completely burned out. He had no structure in his business and he was just flying by the seam of his pants. And the crazy part is, now that he's doing $150,000 per month, you might think that there's no way because he's working more. But actually, he's working less now than when he was making $30,000 per month. And he has significantly less stress. The reason Tyler's able to work less now is because he's actually working efficiently and not just working like he's a chicken with his head cut off. So he actually has a targeted plan on exactly what he's going to do. And that's the difference between people who make a little bit of money and people who make a lot of money. When I scale companies, I look at it from the theory of constraints, basically stating that there's just one thing holding a business back from growth. And whenever that roadblock, that constraint is released, the business will grow up into the next constraint. And then we repeat. We can remove constraint and we grow again, over and over and over again. When Tyler came to us, he had a few issues. One, he was working just way too much. He was completely burned out. Two, his deal size was only $10,000. Three, his text per lead was far too high, which means he's not generating as many leads as he should from his marketing dollars. And then his lead to appointment conversion rate was far too low, which just means he's not maximizing each lead he has in his system to the highest degree. So here's how I decipher what lever and problem we need to fix first. So the first thing I always do is I want to remove any roadblock that's going to keep us from growing, period, out of the business. Once I do that, then we're going to look at what's the shortest time and easiest effort activity we can do to create the biggest outcome, which is going to be the most highest leverage activity we can do. And then I'm going to work down the list of leverage. So to start with, Tyler had to get himself free. He was overworked and burned out and could not take on anything else to implement in his business without freeing himself up. And like most people, Tyler was in a position where if he wasn't growing his company wasn't growing. So that's why he has to be free. And here's how we did it. So the first activity Tyler did was he wrote out every single task he did on an Excel document, and then he graded them two ways. He graded them in scale of 0 to 3, and how much time does it take you to do this activity, and then a scale of 0 to 3, and how much revenue does this activity generate. 0 obviously being the lowest on the scale, so lowest time, lowest revenue, and 3 being the highest. Now that we have all these things scored, it's his job to delegate all the 0 revenue generating tasks to other people. Once he's delegated all the 0 revenue tasks, his job is to delegate 1 revenue task and 3 time consumption tasks to other people, so that he's going to free up his time and he's going to make more money per hour. Because if you do $5 an hour task, you make $5 an hour. If you do $1,000 an hour task, you make $1,000 an hour. Now that this first roadblock is released, we move on to the next constraint of the business. So as I mentioned earlier, the few problems he's having was text to lead and then lead to appointment. So those are the next two constraints we're going to focus on because they're the fastest ones to implement. So the first one we're going to go with is text per lead. And truly, to understand that text per lead for Tyler was an issue, is I had to understand like what that looks like for the industry and for us as well. So for example, his text per lead was around like 400 or 450. And for us, it's supposed to be about 200. So I send 200 texts, I get 1 lead. And he was about double that. So that means that we could essentially double his lead flow with just a few small minor tweaks. In fixing the text per lead, all it takes is a little bit of restructuring and launch control with our data segmentation process so that you're following up with all the leads the way you should be and all the leads that are supposed to get sent to the CRM actually do. This usually requires us also to redefine lead criteria to make sure that everyone who is interested in selling at any level gets actually pushed to CRM and gets called immediately. We don't want to wait 24 hours to call these people. We want to literally call them as soon as they become a lead. That was one mistake we actually made at the very beginning too, is we would think, oh yeah, we'll just get to them whenever. But new leads actually account for 75% of all of our appointments. So we were pretty stupid for even wanting to wait 24 hours to call these people. That's just dumb. To further improve text per lead, we had to train his textures more. So basically there's 3 types of replies. You have positive, which should always be leads. You have negative, which should basically always be do not call or whatever like that. Then you have, I'm not gonna use my middle finger, but you have what they call the gray area replies. And those are the areas where it's people responding like, who is this? Make me an offer, blah, 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 something like this. It's like not clear if they're interested or they're not interested. You don't know. It's a gray area. Those are all the texts we need to review and train our textures on. And we need to redirect them to being like, hey, it's one text. Overcome objection, same text message. Are you interested in selling? And redirect them back to the initial question we care about as fast as possible in a way that's grammatically correct and is clear. And when we do this, we increase the amount of leads exponentially. Our best texters perform 50% better than our worst texters. So it's just like the same as sales as it is with texting. You have to train these people. Since I knew doubling lead flow was going to create a massive influx of leads in the CRM and probably break it, we need to establish a proven process so we can get ahead of this problem. And obviously, since we know lead to appointment conversion is already bad, just adding more leads is going to make a bad problem worse, aka having bigger holes in our our bucket, losing more money. So this is important. Tyler did have a team. So his team consisted of 4 texters who were all ex-cold callers. He had an executive assistant that he hired to delegate all this task initially. And he had a part-time acquisition manager. This was his team. So I basically just asked him, I said, hey man, how good are these texters that used to be cold callers? Like how good were they at cold calling and why'd they move over? And he basically just told me that like they were really, really good. Cold calling just didn't work for whatever reason for him in that current time. It just wasn't as profitable. So because it wasn't as good of an ROI, he moved them over to texting and doubled down on that. Now I was like, well, one, we don't need 4 texters. That's just kind of overkill. So if you think they're that good, let's just move them to lead manager so that they can follow up and call all the new leads coming in and then set them to qualified appointments. And he was like, yeah, that would totally work. I could train them up on that. So this is like an important lesson because this kind of looks like a complex problem on the surface, but in reality, it's actually a pretty simple and very quick fix because Tyler already had the right people on the ship. They were just doing the wrong jobs on the boat, right? So we could just repurpose people who had skill sets to do things that were way higher dollar per activity, allowing us to leverage our time to make more money using less time, right? So again, we were getting better at working. We were getting more efficient, making more dollars per hour. And that's why it's important to always reevaluate your team and what their skill sets are and if they're operating in the highest value task for the company. So we got these 2 LMs defined and it's clear where they're going to go and what they're going to do, right? But now we need to build the actual process in the system for them to come in and have immediate success and impact on the business's bottom line. So we gave him our full process exactly as we do it and structured his CRM exactly the same way. So just so you guys know, here's the lead statuses you should be using in your CRM is 1, you should be having new leads. You should have working leads. Working leads are just people who you've never contacted. They're new leads who got no contacts. Like they didn't answer your phone call. We have follow-ups and that's cold, warm, and hot. Cold is they're just high price, no motivation. Warm is they're going to sell in 30 to 90 days. And then hot is they're basically appointment criteria, but for whatever reason, they couldn't be set. Those are going to be your best leads, right? Hot. Then we have what we call unqualified. We have pending appointment. Pending appointment is just like the people who no show us on the appointment. We have appointment set. We have offer follow-up, cold, warm, and hot. Basically, this is cold is going to sell. We think they're going to sell in 90 days or more. Warm is their 30 to 90 days. Hot is next 30. And then we have what stage called negotiation, which we think these people are going to close in the next 7 days. So those are our best leads in the entire system, right? Then we have contract signed. And then after that, we have close loss, which means that they sold to another investor, something like that, right? That's it. The reason that these lists need to be organized the correct way and that this process needs to be followed is because it allows us to make marketing lists within our CRMs so that the lead managers can basically cold call highly motivated warm lists, right? So without these statuses, we have no idea what bucket a lead is in. It's just wherever in the abyss. So it has to be categorized the correct way so that we know what list needs to be called by our lead managers. We also know what list to run marketing campaigns to because we know what converts and what doesn't convert. Just a pro tip, your working leads that are less than 14 days old in your system is going to be the highest converting list from lead to appointment that you have. One other free tip that I completely want to give away is that if you aren't getting contracts signed, but you have a lot of negotiations, which means this is a post-offer stage, then that means that you likely will have a lot of deals close. Because what we found is negotiations take about 7 to 14 days to close. So if it hits negotiation stage, it takes us about 7 to 14 days to get that person to sign a contract. Then we convert about 50% of all total negotiations into contracts. So if you've given 20 offers and have 10 negotiations, then you should feel pretty confident that you have several contracts coming in the future. Like I said, how the working list, less than 14-day-old leads, is the absolute best list for converting leads to appointments. We gave Tyler a process on how to maximize those leads to the highest degree. Because with SMS, there's a very low contact rate with these leads, right? So for us, before installing this process, we were contacting about 40 to 45% of all of our leads. After we installed this process, I call it 14 days of hell, we started contacting 85 to 90% of our leads, which means we basically doubled our lead flow without spending any more money because we doubled the amount of people we were talking to from our current leads that we were generating. This is massive. So here's the process. Day 0, when the lead's created, we're going to do 3 double dials. You'll be surprised at how many people pick up on that second dial. Day 1 to 14 is we are going to make 2 double dials per day, every single day. And then at the same time, we're going to have a text sequence that goes out to these sellers randomly throughout the day. Day 1, when the lead's created, being that they're going to get a text immediately when they don't answer. And then they're going to get a text following that 1 hour later that's just going to say, hey, just bumping this. That has a really high reply rate. And then we just more text every day for 14 days, just saying like, hey, are you interested in selling, blah, blah, blah. That's your working list. Now for cold leads, we want to contact them every 30 days. For warm leads, roughly every 14 days. And for hot, every 7 days at the very least. This is all going to be manual follow-up on hot. Hot's very, very important. to keep that up to date because everyone's situation is different, and managing them per seller is going to be way more effective than having some mass sequence that you need to do. Pending appointments is actually another very lucrative list in your CRM. And these are all the people who no-showed you on your appointment. They didn't answer your phone call. They didn't answer your door knock, whatever it might have been, right? For us, what we do is we call these people 3 times a day through the list, every single one from different phone numbers. And this allows us to reset people to appointments that we weren't able to give offers to earlier, and has gotten our appointment completion rate above 80% when it used to be 50%. So again, we're now giving 60% more offers from the appointments we are already generating, which means we're going to convert them at a much higher rate. And so now that the CRM set up, they have the processes in place, we need to basically get these lead managers fully trained. So we gave him the onboarding for our LM so that they can get acclimated to the actual process, they can get acclimated to the sales scripts, and then they can start to understand how to overcome objections and what's a good appointment. Knowing these 4 things allows them to be ramped up and start making phone calls the first day. And that's actually the biggest mistake that most people make when they're onboarding salespeople is they wait like 7 to 10 days to train someone before making a phone call. That's like the dumbest thing ever, because the only way to learn how to make phone calls is to actually make phone calls. So you literally want your salespeople who you're hiring and training to make phone calls the first day that they're on, and then review the sales calls with the salesperson you hired. And then they will learn extremely fast so that they can actually start closing deals within the first 2 weeks. And this probably feels like a lot of work, and it is, but if you implement one thing per week, this will start to compound on itself to where at the end of the year, you've done 52 things to build your business. And this is not 52 things. This is like, we're talking 15 things. So it's not that much if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, but you can compound and consistently improve your business so much over the course of a year by doing one thing per week. That's not too much to ask. And as soon as we got the lead managers ramped up to where they're consistently generating appointments without Tyler's involvement, because again, Tyler was involved in lead generation, setting appointments at this point, and closing deals. So now we've fully removed him from all the menial tasks. So he no longer does those things. The last thing we have to do is take his part-time acquisition manager, who we talked about a little bit earlier, and we're going to make him full-time because he's good enough to close deals. He's already done it sort of as a part-time acquisition manager. And now we just need to convert him and give him the title of being full-time. And just to recap where we're at, we're around 45 to 60 days in, and Tyler just went from being completely unorganized and unstructured to having a very organized and structured business that is ready to blast off and grow. And from a numbers standpoint, Tyler's generating about 7 or 8 appointments before we made all these changes. Now he's generating about 10, but again, 10 where he's not involved in any of the generation of those appointments. So that's huge. Plus, not to mention, an extra 2 to 3 appointments per week is about another deal per month, maybe 2 deals per month, depending on how you close. So the next constraint we have after promoting the part-time acquisition manager and the lead managers up to basically owning those roles, we have a new constraint that is basically only about half of our appointments are actually getting offers. And this is a pretty common thing because one, new lead managers don't have as convincing of a call to make the seller feel confident. So that's one piece. It's a training mechanism to make your lead managers make the seller feel a lot more confident in that we can solve their problem so that they show up to the call. And then 2, the acquisitions person just would get on calls and not actually give offers. And these are both common things that we have to train on. This is where leadership skills come into play. Our goal and our number one priority became, let's offer 80% of all appointments that get set on our calendar. And since we had defined that, yes, some of it's lead managers that need to get training, it's also like the acquisition manager would go on these appointments. So it wasn't so much of a show up rate. It was more of a completion rate problem. So here's the conversation and talk track we wanted to have with the acquisition manager who just wasn't completing appointments by giving offers, right? Complete appointments, offer given. Those 2 have to be true. And this talk track can be used for anything, but this is just simply like what I would use for this specific scenario. So I would say, hey, let's use acquisition manager as Greg. Hey, Greg, I'm just a little curious. I was seeing that not all these appointments that you've been attending have been getting offers. Is there something that I can, maybe train the lead managers on to increase the quality of these appointments? Basically, you're gonna get his feedback and he's gonna go a couple routes, right? He might go like, oh, the appointments are actually fine, like, and take ownership that like, hey, I'm actually just like not giving offers and I really should be. And I kind of realized that, but like, here's the issues I'm having, the roadblocks I'm having to give offers, 1, 2, 3. If that's the case, easiest scenario, just overcome those and help him see what needs to be seen by training him. In other scenarios, he actually gives you some feedback on, hey, the LMs aren't doing this. Here's the quality of the appointment I'm getting. And like, this person's just not ready to sell yet, blah, 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 blah. And again, we want to preach ownership and accountability. So like, 1, we're going to be like, okay, yeah, I'll train the lead managers on that. But then 2, we want to basically address like what he can do when he's faced with that situation. And basically we want to take these reasons and just go deeper on them, right? Basically at the end of the conversation of me asking like what the lead managers can do, what I want to take away from that is the reasons why he's not making offers. And then whatever those reasons are, I'm going to dive deeper into understanding why he's not making offers and what we can do about it. So I want to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. understood. So basically a question that I would ask for whatever reason it would be, do you think XYZ reason should prevent you from making an offer? And if he's like, yes, that should prevent me. Okay, well, how could we remove XYZ reason from being an issue so that we can get around and make an offer? And then hear what they say. You give them a complex question and they give you a complex answer, hopefully, right? Basically, we're just helping the acquisition manager come to their own answers of how they can fix their problem without us having to tell them. We don't really want to use, Jocko Willink calls it his leadership power. You don't really want to use that power to be like, you need to do this, you have to do that, unless it's something that's very, very high leverage where you're like, this is the fate of the entire business rests on this one decision. You don't want to be using that power because if you use it too much, people stop listening. A final piece that I like to ask is like, if someone's just really hard to convince, but you understand the way they're thinking about problems, is I like to basically tell them, well, have you seen it this way? And then it's an altering view, devil's advocate. It's your view, should be your view and what you believe is the right view, and have them look at it through that lens. That helps a ton as well. Leadership is a pretty complex idea, but a couple books I'd recommend reading are Dichotomy of Leadership and Multipliers. Those are two great books, but the simple definition of leadership is just behavior change. So you want to be able to consistently just change people's behaviors to get them more aligned with the goals of the company. As Tyler's AM increased his performance and started to maximize the appointments that he was going on by giving more offers, we felt very confident and comfortable that we could do the next stage in our constraint, which is just at this point increasing our lead flow because all the holes in the bucket downstream are fixed. So once we increased lead flow, we just doubled our launch control accounts. So we went from 2 accounts to 4 accounts, sending about 10,000 texts a day. We basically went from 10 appointments per week to 15 appointments per week, which giving us more than enough appointments to lock up more than $100,000 a month in closed revenue. Now we do have enough appointments where we definitely need a second acquisition manager because a sweet spot for appointments per AM, it depends on who they are, right? You want to give your best acquisition guy the most appointments possible. It's different for everyone, but in general, around 2 a day is a good spot to land. And with 15 total for a week, that's going to be almost 3 a day. So we don't want to get to that point. So we need another AM. And just for even more simple context of what adding 5 additional appointments per week does to your business is it should add you 1 contract a week or 4 per month. Which, do the math, that's probably close to 100 grand for almost anyone. So after a couple of weeks of interviewing, once we decided we needed another acquisition manager, Tyler found a struggling wholesaler who was willing to come onto his team and close deals for him. He basically immediately became one of the top producers, locking up $60K in projections his first month and locking up over $100,000 in projections his second month, which is just crazy. Which leaves us at 5 months in with the current team set up of 2 texters, 4 lead managers, because when we doubled texting, we needed to also hire a couple more LMs. Rule of thumb for LMs, you want around 8 to 10 leads per LM coming in per day. That's just been what's been successful for us. We have 2 AMs now, and then we have Tyler himself, and also the executive assistant, who's his right-hand man. So this team went from being, again, very unorganized and almost nothing to being extremely structured and has removed him from the day-to-day of everything because he used realtors to do a lot of his dispo. So dispo is pretty turnkey. And truly, this is the business setup that you really need for $100,000 consistent months. It's not complex and doesn't cost you a ton of money. And it's important for me to note that the first 2 months of building a strong foundation allowed us to have the quick success and instantly scale to 6 figures per month. Without that, we would not be here consistently. Through just systems, processes, and foundational pieces of a business, we were able to take Tyler from 30 to 100K per month, but there was one lever left for us to pull, and that was to increase his deal size from 10K to hopefully up to $30,000 eventually, which is basically why we implemented the MLS strategy that allows you to wholesale your deals on the MLS. So we implemented this in the 5th month, and as soon as it got implemented that month, we locked up $200,000 in projected profit. Obviously, not all of it's going to close, 75%. So that's 150K literally instantly. That's the first month of it ever being implemented. So this lever is still massive, but it works best when you have all the other foundational pieces of the business so that you can easily implement it because now Tyler has so much time in the day to work on anything new. And since that 5th month of having 200K projected, he's been consistently closing $150,000 monthly. Building a consistent business is not easy, but it's actually quite simple. So to execute a 200K per month model, it's literally just a math problem that we have to solve for. So this means selling 2 deals at 25K a pop per week. We need to get 3 contracts signed. We need to make 15 offers to sellers. We need to set 18 appointments. We need to generate 75 net leads. And we need to generate about 100 leads per week. And if we hit these numbers, boom, you have a 200K per month business every single month. The hard part is hitting these numbers week in and week out. That's why it's important to have a dialed in business system so that we can continue to correct the ship on a daily basis if we're off from KPI. So example, on Wednesday, if we're off on leads, we might want to run an extra campaign that day so that we can generate the excess that we missed on Monday and Tuesday so we don't miss on Sunday for our total lead count for the whole week. We need to make sure we hit that every single week because that's our first leading indicator. If our appointments are down, the one thing we do is we take our CRM of warm leads and we put them into mass marketing and we reactivate warm leads so that our lead managers can call and have a higher chance of setting appointments. If our contracts are down, we're going to review the pipeline, check for low-hanging fruit. Whose MAO is higher than the seller's asking price? Lock that person up. What are you doing? Why aren't we locking that up? Any objections that seem to be very overcomable, call them yourself. The sales manager calls them. Send it to another acquisition guy. Do something to put contracts on the board. If sold deals are down, well, we have no closings lined up for this week, or we have one and we need two. Well, the closing that's set for early next week, let's ask the buyer and seller if they can move their closing date up and close on Friday. You realistically want to be doing this like 2 weeks out because it's hard to do it 1 week out, but this is an example of something you can do to push revenue up sooner, to make the cash conversion cycle faster. So these are things you have to do and the levels you have to operate on in order to build a consistent and reliable 6-figure per month business.